Hello everyone, welcome back to Orms TV. My name is Jess and this is Videography for Beginners, the show where we introduce you to the fundamental techniques for shooting professional and cinematic video. In our previous episode, we covered everything to do with all of the available frame rates and how you can use them. If you want to see that, you can check out the link to that series playlist in the description of this video below. However, in today's video, we're going to cover everything to do with shutter speed, including how it works, the rules around using it in video, and how you can break those rules for the purposes of storytelling, aesthetics, or creative intent. Shutter speed is one of the exposure controls on your camera, meaning that it has the function of making your video footage either lighter or darker. Specifically, it controls how long light hits the sensor of your camera. Shutter speed is measured in fractions of a second. Its values can either be slow or fast, meaning that the shutter is open for longer or shorter durations, allowing more or less light to come into contact with the camera's sensor. 1/50th of a second and 1/125th of a second are both common shutter speeds in videography, the former being a slower shutter speed than the latter. As we continue with this series on videography, you will discover that each of your camera's exposure controls has an artifact that accompanies it. If you're familiar at all with photography, you'll know that the artifact of shutter speed is motion blur. In video, changing your shutter speed will also change the nature of the motion blur in your video clip. However, it does not work quite the same as it does when taking a photograph. It has been established that in order to produce an image with motion blur akin to our perception of the world on an everyday basis, you should set your shutter speed to double what your frame rate is. This is referred to as the 180-degree rule. For example, if you're shooting at 25 frames per second, you should set your shutter speed to 1/50th of a second. If you're getting those 50 FPS cinematic slow-mo vibes, you should shoot at 100th of a second. If you're using the NTSC format, which we discussed in the previous video, link in the description, you may have to round up or down to the closest increment. For example, 60 frames per second should be paired with 1/125th of a second. If you want your video to look professional, you should probably consider following this rule. However, while most of your videos should comply with the 180-degree rule, you can break it in instances where you want to create a certain atmosphere or maybe tell your story more effectively. By progressively lowering your shutter speed closer and closer to your frame rate, you will create more and more motion blur until eventually even the tiniest movements in frame cause everything to seem really wispy and out of focus. The opposite is true for increasing your shutter speed to greater than double your frame rate. It will decrease the motion blur and make everything appear sharper, harder, and hyper-realistic. There are a number of reasons why you might choose to shoot at a lower shutter speed. Let's run through a few of them. A lower shutter speed can be extremely effective for filming flashback sequences, particularly when you want the viewer or the character in question to doubt whether the flashback is accurate, as the excessive motion blur contributes to the sense that something is unclear. This is probably how the famous flashback sequences were shot in the early Jason Bourne movies. You can also use a lower shutter speed to create a dreamscape, or to indicate that your character is in a dream, or even that they are seeing things that aren't there. Fun fact, this technique is particularly effective when combined with a first-person POV shot. Finally, lowering your shutter speed is perfect for showing the audience that your character is drugged or intoxicated, as the blurriness of the footage mimics the vision of someone under the influence. A notable example can be found in Season 4, Episode 7 of Showtime's hit show Homeland, where the main character's bipolar medication is switched for something that makes her hallucinate. Just like you might choose to shoot at a lower shutter speed, you can also increase your shutter speed to create a particular effect. The first of these being hyper-realism. Since increasing your shutter speed to more than double your frame rate sharpens and hardens your footage, it is a really great way to create the sense that the story is taking place in an exaggerated reality. It has been suggested that this technique was used in Spike Lee's 2002 film 25th Hour to create the sense of hyper-realism during the main character's final 24 hours of freedom before he is to be incarcerated. You can also increase your shutter speed if you want to construct a feeling of tension and fear. Higher shutter speeds can often come across as very frightening and disturbing because they are so jarringly different to how we perceive reality. Apparently, higher shutter speeds were used during the first 27 minutes of Steven Spielberg's World War II epic Saving Private Ryan, which depicts the terror and chaos of the beach landings in Normandy. Another example is the incredibly well choreographed church fight scene in Kingsman: The Secret Service, which also makes use of higher shutter speeds to make the action more hard-hitting and intense. We actually used this technique to create a sense of tension and suspense in our teaser video for the inaugural season of the Orms Air podcast. If you want to see how that turned out, you can check out the link in the description of this video. In conclusion, manipulating your shutter speed and breaking the 180-degree rule can be an incredibly effective way to connect the viewer to a character's mental and emotional state. 9 times out of 10 in a professional video creation environment, you'll find it best to set your shutter speed to double your frame rate in obedience to the 180-degree rule. However, you will quickly discover that this can cause all sorts of challenges with controlling your exposure. We'll discuss these issues and workarounds for them in future videos, so you can subscribe to our channel if you want to get that video delivered straight into your feed. That is it for this episode of Videography for Beginners. I hope that you guys feel smarter after watching this video than you did before you clicked on it. If you have any questions about shutter speed or just video creation in general, please feel free to pop them down in the comments below. We do actually read every single comment and respond in as much detail as we possibly can, so rest assured, we will get back to you. We just had an exclusive first look at the brand new Canon 1DX Mark III, and if you want to see that video, you can check it out here. Or you can have a look at this playlist of other educational videos. Until next time, cheers!